Hello, it's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, one family's campaign to make it a crime not to call 999 if someone dies or has a medical emergency. This is after Kimberly McCassie was found unresponsive, and it took 30 hours, more than an entire day, before anyone called for help. Tonight, we'll bring you her family's story.
How can you leave somebody and not phone 999 and not be held responsible for it? I mean, if you leave the scene of an accident, you get into trouble, but you can leave somebody's body and not face any criminal charges at all.
Also tonight, we all know that councils are having to make spending cuts, but how would you feel if your bins were only going to be collected every 4 weeks? Bristol City Council is proposing just that. They say it's to encourage more of us to recycle. We'll hear why some residents think it's a pretty rubbish idea. Plus, the sacked Premier League referee David Coote says he turned to drugs in part because he was afraid to come out as gay. We'll be joined by Nigel Owens, the former rugby union referee, to talk about homophobia in sport. And the wheels of justice in motion on what could be the slowest police chase ever. We'll bring it to you in full, if we have time. All that to come, and much more, on the UK Tonight. If something happened to your loved one, you'd hope that whoever was with them would call 999, especially if it appeared to be a medical emergency. But for 29-year-old Kimberly McCassie, that didn't happen. In fact, after being found unresponsive, it took at least 30 hours for anyone to ring the emergency services. At her inquest, the court heard that Kimberly had taken ecstasy with a man she considered to be a friend, Ryan Sheridan, before they went to bed together. He found that she had, in his words, gone cold, but he didn't call for help for at least another 24 hours. Even then, it was his mum he contacted, who, on finding what had happened, went to buy food for him before herself picking up the phone to dial 999. The coroner couldn't conclude how Kimberly died because of the delay in making that call, and said Mr. Sheridan, who didn't attend the inquest despite being summoned, was a self-serving coward and demonstrated a blatant disregard for Kimberly. Shocking to hear, but in the eyes of the law, Kimberly's friend had done nothing wrong. Well, now Kimberly's family are campaigning for Kimberly's Law, which would make any delay in notifying the emergency services of a death or medical incident a crime. I've been speaking to Kimberly's mother, Cassie, and her aunt, Shelley Crooks.
Kimberly, she was just a fun-loving daughter. She was amazing, to be honest. She thought so much of her daughter that she left behind. She was 8 years old at the time. She just loved having fun, making people laugh. She was one in a million.
What do you know about the circumstances in which you lost Kimberly?
To be honest, not really much. All we know really is she went round to a friend's house. Then after that, whatever happened was like, there's only the two people what know, and obviously Kimberly's not here to tell her side of the story. We know from the coroner that at some point she came unresponsive, and the emergency services wasn't called. Then she passed away. And still for a further 30 hours, the emergency services wasn't called. The heating was turned on and her body was covered, which made it virtually impossible to give us a cause of death. But not only that, she couldn't be identified either.
It's really difficult for you to relive this, and I appreciate you doing it with us tonight. This is really difficult. Carrie, Shelley's just touched there on the consequences of 999 not being called as soon as Kimberly was known to be unresponsive by the person she was with. And questions to be asked as to why that didn't happen. But also you discovered something that I don't think many people know, is that there is no legal requirement for somebody to call 999. It feels like the most natural thing to do in the world when somebody is in trouble, medical distress or unresponsive.
Yeah, we was really shocked to find that out. We couldn't believe it. We had to ask the question quite a few times to solicitors and things. We just couldn't believe, how can you leave somebody and not phone 999 and not be held responsible for it? I mean, if you leave the scene of an accident, you get into trouble, but you can leave somebody's body and not face any criminal charges at all. We was appalled. Absolutely appalled.
Still are, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carrie, how did that make you feel? Because ultimately, Kimberly's death, we don't know whether it was avoidable because emergency services weren't called, and you know.
Yeah, because if he'd have phoned an emergency services when he knew something was wrong, who knows, he could have saved her. But then to know that she'd actually passed and then still didn't phone him and left her, why would you leave somebody that long?
And it's given them no dignity either, is it?
And as a family, Carrie and Shelley, what does that leave you with? Because you don't know how Kimberly died and the circumstances in which she was found, this whole aftermath. You know, what's that left you with as a family? How do you feel about it?
Total shock. There's no words to describe how we feel, to be honest.
Yeah. It's just all the unanswered questions. We've got loads of questions. There's only one person we can ask, and even he wouldn't go to the inquest to answer our questions. He refused to go. So we've still got them unanswered questions, and they're never going to be answered.
What are some of those unanswered questions?
You know, obviously, why didn't you phone 999 when she come unresponsive? Why didn't you give her CPR? What was going on in his mind to just leave her there? Why? It's mind-boggling, honest, it really is.
Well, Carrie, in Kimberly's name, you want Kimberly's law, and to make it illegal for somebody not to call the emergency services when they are needed. Why would you compel people to seek out your petition and sign it, Carrie?
Just so this doesn't happen to anybody else. I won't like anybody else to go through what we've been through. So I think it should be a law so other people can get help. And we've had a lot of people that's actually reached out to us saying that the same has happened to their loved ones. And you just don't want it happening to anybody else.
Well, a big thank you to the McCassie family for sharing Kimberly's story and their quest for Kimberly's law, that petition online. And now, opera singer and star of the Go Compare adverts, Wyn Evans, has apologised and stepped back from the Strictly Come Dancing live tour. This was after he was heard making an obscene remark earlier this month. This is a developing story. You may remember he apologised at the weekend. Well, we now understand this evening he's taking a break from the tour as well as from his show on BBC Radio Wales. Sky's Alice Porter has been following this story for us, and it broke a few hours ago. Alice, put it into context for us, for those who haven't been following this particular Strictly scandal.
Yes, Wyn Evans was meant to be performing, in fact, this evening in Liverpool, but clearly didn't want to attract any more attention to himself and has decided to take a step back from the tour. And we have his statement, which said, "I've agreed with the BBC that I'll take some time out from my radio show and the Strictly Live tour, as well as my other public commitments, to prioritise my well-being. I'm deeply sorry for the pain my inappropriate actions have caused and plan to take this time for self-reflection." Now, this latest statement comes just 2 days, as you were just saying, after he made a public apology for what he called unacceptable comments that were made. Now, this was reported by the Mail on Sunday. They reported that he made a sexualised remark as the tour's dancers gathered together for a photo for the launch of the tour. He received a warning from producers. And the problem is, I mean, Strictly Come Dancing has always tried to be traditionally very much this feel-good family show. It's been mired in a whole lot of scandal over the last few months or so. And so I'm sure the BBC are perhaps relieved that he's decided to take a bit of a step back from the show, given the press attention that this particular incident has attracted over the last few days or so. Now, he'd been touring the UK with Katya Jones last year, and the problem is, during Strictly, there was a lot of awkward incidents between the two dancers. That was picked up by a lot of viewers. There was a time where he put his hand on her waist and she removed it. He tried to high-five her and she didn't seem to reciprocate. And that raised a lot of eyebrows. Now, in November, he sort of portrayed himself and said that the media had given him a negative portrayal of what happened and that he'd been sort of targeted. But clearly now we're getting a slightly different tone. He's clearly far more contrite, and so much so that he has stepped away from the tour for the foreseeable future.
OK, Alice, thank you. Alice Porter there with the latest on Wyn Evans and Strictly Come Dancing. Thank you. Now, after last summer's riots, dozens of under-18s were charged for their part in the unrest. In a new report out today, the Children's Commissioner says many of the sentences given to the teenagers were unusually severe and their criminal records should be wiped. Research suggesting that distrust of the police and the thrill of the moment were the driving factors behind young people joining last summer's unrest, and online misinformation had less of an impact. Let's talk about this in some more detail. We can bring in youth worker Rayanne Priest, who is in Birmingham tonight. Rayanne, good of you to join us. This is a very interesting report because when the Prime Minister came out after last summer's violent protests and riots, he said, you know, they would feel the full force of the law, and it didn't seem to discriminate between adults and children taking part. People would be punished for their part. But looking at this report, there are different motivations for children, and motivations, I would imagine, from your work with young people that you would recognise.
Yes, definitely. From conversations that we did have with some young people, it does align with the research that has come out today, the report, that a lot of young people was just going along with the hype. They was watching social media. We know that young people make impulsive decisions, and if they haven't got the right people around at that time in that community who they've got relationships with, and those brave spaces where we can have those conversations with young people, we find really important as well, because then we can challenge some of the ideologies and the beliefs and values of young people. But it didn't seem that was happening.
Yeah,
that's why we found that young people was just acting.
Yeah, I mean, the stats, at least 147 children were arrested after last summer's riots, 84 of them charged, some of them as young as 11. And I was quite interested in the line about the distrust in police. And we talk about that a lot when it comes to young people and different communities across the UK. And this perception they have of this police, this relationship or lack thereof with police officers. What can you tell us about your insight into that and what young people are telling you?
Yeah, again, it's the same. Young people will say that they don't have a relationship since local policing has gone out of communities. 9 times out of 10, the police that are in that community don't know the young people. And I think that affects the relationships between police and young people. I think there needs to be more joined up approaches with youth workers and other agencies to help build better relationships with other agencies that that might build a bit of trust with young people and the police. But yeah, that's very common.
Yeah, and another factor, a lack of opportunities in their community. I mean, that's something we talk about so much when it comes to youth crime. The other factor, simple curiosity about what was going on. These are young, impressionable kids. If this is going on in their community, if the adults around them are partaking in this, yes, they may get caught up in this. It's the stupidity of youth, isn't it? People do things when they're young that they regret. But the difference in this situation is because of the high profile of it, they now have criminal records. The Children's Commission is saying, these criminal records should be wiped. This should all be taken into account. Do you support that? Or there will be certain people watching tonight going, they were doing bad things. You know, they should be treated as criminals. Where do you stand on that? Should there be some more understanding?
I think that there does need to be a bit more understanding about the root causes of young people's activism. I mean, you know, activism can be channeled in a correct way if you've got the right people there to help channel and have these critical discussions with young people. And I think that that's what was lacking at the time. Young people was just seeing the hype on social media and just reacting impulsively. Where if you've got the right people within that community to be able to have those discussions with young people, then it helps make better decisions for young people and choices.
Yeah. Rayanne Priest, really good to get your perspective on this story and the Children's Commissioner's report finding that young people who took part in last summer's riots were driven by a lack of opportunities in their community, curiosity about what was going on and distrust of the police. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
Another big story today concerns the Premier League referee, former Premier League referee, David Coote. You'll remember he was sacked over videos of him using cocaine, and there was another video of him making derogatory remarks about Liverpool Football Club. Well, today he said that he turned to drugs because of the pressures of the job and because he feared coming out. Coote, who was fired back in December, says the pressure of hiding his sexuality contributed to a need to escape.
My sexuality isn't the only reason that led me to be in the position that I was, but I am not telling an authentic story of me if I don't say that I'm gay and that I've had real struggles over time to be able to deal with hiding that. I've already mentioned about hiding my emotions as a young referee, and I hid my sexuality through those years as well, and I became pretty good at hiding my emotions as a ref, which was a good quality as a referee, but a terrible quality as a human being.
Yeah, the first time we've heard directly from David Coote. That interview can be watched on the Sun's website and on YouTube as well. Let's get the thoughts now of former rugby union referee Nigel Owens, who came out while at the top of the sport, the first openly gay man to referee in international rugby. And Nigel, thank you so much for coming on to talk to us about this tonight. What did you make of the video and David Coote's? Can you understand why he's chosen to come out and give this interview and perhaps provide some context for his previous actions?
Yeah, I think I can. And I think unless you've been there and experienced what it's like to live that lie, particularly in the macho world that is sport, particularly football, and like in rugby, it's a very, very dark place to be in. And when you are in that dark place and you're desperate for a way out, you turn to things to try and help you with those mental health issues and help you through it, and people react in different ways. So when I struggled for many, many years, and every single day was a living hell, a constant pain and fear of being found out, particularly as a referee in the macho world of rugby. And I went so desperate that I did something one night that I will regret for the rest of my life, where I left a note from my mum and dad and said I couldn't carry on living my life anymore. I didn't tell them why, and then I was going to end it. And if I hadn't been found a day or so later and airlifted to hospital, where the doctor pretty much said I was in intensive care for a couple of days, another 20 minutes or so, and it may well have been too late to save you. So that's how desperate I was, and in that constant fear. And then going back now 25, 30 years to an environment that was very different to what it is today, but again, very similar. So I can understand that desperation David was in, and how you land up. Sometimes people turn to drink, other people turn to drugs, and people, it's an act of desperation in that situation. So I think you need to put your emotions aside, I think, particularly in the tribalism of football. And you only have to read some of the comments that are about on social media and stuff today from people, and phone-ins from people as well, of when people wonder, why are we still struggling with our identity to be ourselves in today's society? Then you only have to look around and read and listen. And that's what puts people like David and myself all those years ago in that situation, where you are living in constant fear every day. And obviously as a referee, particularly in football, even more so than rugby, then there's the added pressure because you become an easy target then as well. So I can understand and sympathise in the situation that he's been in, and how desperate he was, and how we tried to deal with it was probably not the best way.
Nigel, do you think there should be a bit more of that for him, sympathy? Because there have been some cynics today saying, you know, this statement coming out to the world is excusing his misdemeanours. But it actually provides context, doesn't it? And I remember when these videos came out, and there was a discussion to be had of, there's a person at the centre of this. Yes, these videos of him doing something that will get him sacked for his job is bad enough. But the pile on top of that, and now this extra layer that, you know, he couldn't come out. Should people give this man a break?
Well, I think you need to put into context and understand where he was at that time in that life, that desperation and turning to the drugs to deal with it. Now, I don't know David. I don't know him personally. I don't know his personality. I don't know him as a person. So whether then that is an excuse, I'm not saying that he's using it as an excuse, but does that justify what he said about, I think it was Liverpool football team or their manager?
Yeah, and Jurgen Klopp, their manager.
That becomes a different conversation. I don't know him personally, you know, whether people can say those things, whether they're on drugs or not, I don't know. But I think it's certainly, you have to sort of put those emotions aside and step back. And I can only say from my own experience, I was so desperate of a way out that I took an overdose and tried to take my own.
You know, thank goodness you didn't. And when you did come out and you continued as a referee, this was seen as a positive move, as a brave step, a step forward for sport in general, not just for rugby. Was that your experience? Because, you know, people could say, you're so brave, this is so positive. What was the actual experience like coming out and living as your authentic self, doing that job, as you said, in such a macho world? Did the sort of perception of it match the reality of that decision?
Yeah. Well, when people say, I'm sure if it's brave, for me, somebody brave are the people who, you know, put their lives at risk to rescue other people, and those that are brave people for me. But I did it because I had to do it for my own well-being. And there is no doubt whatsoever, unless you are able to be yourself and be your authentic self, there is no way you can be the best at what you can be. A happy referee is a good referee, and that, I think, is the same in all walks of life. And when I struggled with my performances, I'd only done 1 or 2 internationals at this time, and I didn't referee them well. And if I hadn't come out and accepted who I was, which was a big struggle for me, but just as importantly, because of the nature of the sport of rugby, that value and ethos of respect, I was able to be myself in rugby, and rugby supported me. Then I went on to referee 100 internationals. None of those 98 would have happened if I hadn't been able to be myself. Now, rugby can't take the moral high ground, because a lot of things that rugby can learn from other sport as well. But when it comes to the value of respect and diversity and inclusion and equality within the sport, I certainly do think it leads the way. There are a minority of people that are not nice people in all walks of life, and that includes rugby. But I think in football, the tribalism and that minority, because of the size of the sport, seem to have a louder voice. Now, whether I was a referee in football and would I have been able to take the steps to come out? Probably not, I don't know. But rugby allowed me to do that. And that's what we need. We need football to give this guy a break on his sexuality and his identity. The other stuff around that, I don't know. The guy who can't comment on personality, I don't know. But certainly we need to respect people for who they are and as their identity.
Nigel, very much so. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight. Nigel Owens there, reacting to the story about David Coote that's been developing throughout the day. Appreciate your time, thank you. Well, if you've been affected by that story, you can contact the Samaritans. 116123 is their number, or email joe@samaritans.org. The details on your screen. So to come here on the programme, we meet the so-called super survivor, helping doctors work out why some people respond better to cancer treatment than others. And is this a rubbish idea? Bristol Council asking its residents what they think about their bin being emptied once a month. And hopes that the UK's loneliest bat could have finally found a mate.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight.
We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama.
Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Doctors have begun the first global study of why some people with cancer beat the odds and live much longer than expected. They're bringing them together to look for clues as to why they respond so well to treatment while others go on to die. They're known as the super survivors, and our science correspondent Thomas Moore has been to meet one of them.
Catherine is living life to the full. 5 years after being told by doctors she had just months to live.
So that's good. OK. Go.
She had an aggressive form of brain cancer, but since having treatment, all trace of the tumour has gone. One of the 5% of super survivors who defy the odds.
I've always thought I'm going to live. And I think that's probably why just having that positive mental attitude has been really important for me.
This is Catherine's original scan from March 2020.
Catherine's tumour was 8 centimetres across, but 5 years on, there's just an empty shell. Many cancer specialists have these anecdotal stories of miraculous survival, but scientists are now bringing them together in a global study of people who have lived at least 5 years, despite being diagnosed with hard-to-treat forms of brain, lung or pancreatic cancer.
This is the first time anybody has tried to attempt to answer this question, why there are some selected group of people survive exceptionally well after these dreadful cancers. So we are looking at the genetic makeup of the tumor. We are looking at the proteins. So we will have a much larger database to say more confidently that this is what is making you live longer.
8 NHS cancer centres are joining the Rosalind study. It'll compare tumour samples from super survivors with those from patients who've died, looking for targets for new drugs to improve life chances for all.
You can have 2 cancer patients who are superficially similar in age and health with the same type and stage of tumour, but with very different responses to the same treatment. Now, in the past, doctors would put that down to luck. Now they're looking for a more scientific explanation.
The study is being run by the French biotech company Cure51. It believes it can beat cancer in 20 years.
This is the ambition of the project. But, you know, remember HIV in the beginning of the 80s. It was a killing disease, no hope for the patients, unfortunately. And now you have patients who can live with HIV. But again, the ambition of the project is really to eradicate cancer. If we can unlock these biological mechanisms that are successfully possessed by these survivors and replicate it to the majority of patients, I think we can really win the battle.
Let me just get my oar in.
Catherine will soon be invited to join the study. She appreciates each new day and hopes others with her diagnosis might in future have the chance to do the same. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Cambridge.
It's almost 27 years since the Omagh bombing. 29 people were killed in the attack carried out by the real IRA. Today, their names were read out at the start of a public inquiry, with their families watching on after years of campaigning. Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy has this report.
Young boys, young girls, a young pregnant lady, 17. They says her legs blown off her, a young pregnant woman.
It was the darkest depth of the Troubles. Northern Ireland had embraced peace, the real IRA had not. The dissident terror group detonated a car bomb here that took 29 lives and unborn twins, these some of their faces. It was the worst atrocity in 30 years of violence. One of the dead was a 21-year-old mechanic, Aidan Gallagher. His father, Michael, fought so hard to bring about this inquiry.
How harrowing are the next few weeks going to be?
Well, I think what it does is, it brings a lot of it back, a lot of the issues that you maybe don't want to speak about, but it's hugely important.
No one has ever served jail time for the atrocity. This inquiry won't identify the terrorists. Its remit instead is to examine the intelligence picture from 1998 and ascertain if the attack, just months after the Good Friday Agreement, could have been prevented. It began with tributes to the two Spanish victims, part of an exchange group staying in County Donegal. One, Fernando Blasco Baselga, was just 12 years old.
He was one of 7 brothers and sisters, and he was a good, happy and generous child with strong religious faith.
23-year-old Rocio Abad Ramos was also part of the Spanish group, a gifted student and athlete. Her sister Paloma described the horrific moment she viewed her sister's remains.
When I touched, I felt that there was nothing underneath. It was empty. Then I went to look for the knee, the leg. It was empty. Then I went to look for the arm, the body. It was empty. And only when I reached the head did I touch my sister.
This inquiry will hear from survivors who will paint a picture of the sense of optimism and peace that pervaded this town just months after an historic peace deal had not only been negotiated but endorsed by voters both north and south of the border. That day started off so differently. Survivors will tell the inquiry that it was a lovely day. There was a great atmosphere in Omagh that day, and the weather was good. Everyone was happy and joyful. The next 4 weeks will bring heart-wrenching testimony of how that day was transformed into unprecedented horror and carnage. Stephen Murphy, Sky News, in Omagh.
Still to come on the UK tonight, what would you say if your council floated the idea of only collecting your bins every 4 weeks? Well, that is what is potentially facing the people of Bristol. I'll be speaking to some of them next. Hello, welcome back. It's well known that UK councils are struggling for money and having to cut costs. But how would you react if your council suggested that it was going to cut your bin collection to once a month? Well, that's one of the proposals the Bristol City Council is consulting residents on as it looks to shore up its finances amid a reported £22 million black hole. Early responses from the people who live in Bristol haven't been positive. So I spoke to the Deputy Council Leader, Heather Mack, from the Green Party to find out why the council is floating this idea.
There are a lot of factors at play. One of them is environmental. So at the moment, we only recycle 45% of our waste, which is good for a city. But there's a national target of 65%. So we've got a lot of work to do. And every bit of waste that goes into a black bin does have a carbon impact. And the way that we dispose of that is also going to be taxed more in a few years' time. So there is the carbon impact, but there's also the financial impact that our costs are going to rocket up in a few years' time. So we need to go out to people and ask, would you rather that we try and do everything that we can to reduce that black bin waste, recycle as much as possible, and also save us money in the long run? And what changes can we make to make that easier?
Financial impact for the council as well. You know, if you were cynical, you would, say that you're saving money by doing this, because I know that, local media reporting Bristol City Council don't want to go the other way of city councils and go bankrupt. Local media reports saying you have a giant deficit of £22 million. So we talk about recycling and trying to get recycling rates up, but is it also to save the council cash as well?
We are in a financially challenging place, and that is after 14 years of Conservative government slashing funding for local councils, and then the situation not getting much better right now under a Labour government. But ultimately what we're doing is we are spending taxpayers' council tax money, and we are going out and saying, look, if we carry on collecting waste as we are, it's going to cost more and more money. What would you prefer? How could we best make our budgets balance, make your money go further with our current system?
What's the reaction been so far then? Because this is part of the consultation period. I'm looking at a petition online that's got, well, it's just shy of the 5,000 signatures it wants. So, and it's against a 4-week collection or any change to the bin collection. In fact, they say that the city is struggling with missed bin collections already and fly tipping. So from what I can see, the reaction hasn't been positive. Officially, in the consultation period, what's it like?
Well, we only just started the consultation period, so I guess what I'm getting at the moment is feedback from conversations and feedback, as you say, from the petition and social media. And I know a number of people have concerns about a 4-weekly collection. I've also heard a lot of cases where people could absolutely function fine with a 3 or 4 weekly collection. And that's why we're asking, we just really want people to fill in the consultation that also includes a lot of questions and a lot of options about how people recycle. So our main priority here is to look at how we recycle and how we deliver that service. So what do people recycle a lot of? What's hard to recycle? Do we need bigger boxes, smaller bags? How can we best recycle as much of what comes out of our houses?
Yeah, recycling comes with a cost, though, doesn't it? Recycling isn't cheap. In fact, in some cases, it can be more expensive than, waste.
So, depending on what the product is, but we sell the majority of our recycling. We get money back, so it would save us masses of money if waste goes from those black bins and then goes to recycling. There's a market for it across the country.
Yeah, that's interesting. Where does it go? Because I think that's one of the points. People are a bit cynical when it comes to recycling because they go, well, it all goes in the tip anyway. It all goes in the same place at the end of the day. And I know there have been investigations that have been done with, say, soft plastics being recycled at supermarkets. Campaign groups have put air tags in them and seen them, flown to China and going to waste tips. So people are cynical. Where's the recycling going in Bristol?
So Bristol is fab, and we have been really great in terms of how we recycle and where it goes. So almost everything goes within the UK, so we know exactly where it's going and how it's being reused. The only exception there is that cardboard goes to Europe just because it has more processing power, but nothing goes any further than Europe. So we are making use of every resource that comes through our recycling centres.
Oh, this story's causing a bit of a fuss. People love talking about bins, they love talking about potholes and the weather. We know that much on the UK tonight. Let's talk about this in a bit more detail. Robbie Staniforth joins us. He advises the UK government and co-hosts the Talking Rubbish podcast. And we've also got with us tonight Tara Miran, Bristol resident and leader of the Better Streets campaign group. Thank you, both of you, for joining us on the programme tonight. I'll come to you first, if I may, Tara. You actually live in Bristol. This is the consultation period. What would you say to Heather Mack, the Deputy Council Leader, about this?
I would say I have been on both sides of City Hall. I have worked inside City Hall. I have worked outside City Hall. When I was in City Hall, I had a community engagement, race equalities, public health hat on. And I would say this whole new proposal that's been proposed for the consultation, the way the consultation is being, done, conducted online, this whole process up until now, where us residents are finding out today, some of us are finding out, some of us still don't know there's a consultation online that you can, a form that you can fill in. I would say it's not been done in a considerate manner. I would say it's not been done in an inclusive manner. I would say the most vulnerable in communities are going to suffer even more so than they already are. I would say the current recycling and waste collection system that is in place in Bristol is broken, is very, very broken and fractured across the city,
Bristol's got some of the best recycling rates in the country. I keep hearing that Bristol's got some of the best recycling rates in the country. You're doing really well, so you need to do more of it.
You should come and spend a day here and walk through the city, go from one area of higher deprivation to the other area where it's much wealthier. You will see huge disparity. And I am very active across Bristol. I go around the city daily, and it's not okay what I see. And actually, I'm one of the leading voices behind the Better Streets campaign in St. Paul's. We've been campaigning for over a year, because the current bin collection system here, it's not adequate. It's not designed to work for the build-up of the community, the households we have here, the community, the number of people we have in this space. So
the idea of a monthly collection just for you is not going to work for your community. Let's bring in Robbie here, because Robbie, the council have said, look, we get it, this is a consultation period. We understand that some people, if they have young families, there's talk about, a separate nappy bin collection. But to me, that sort of defeats the object, isn't it? It's just another collection to throw in the mix. Sanitary products, that's like pretty much every household that will have to have that collected. So, there are so many different caveats to this. But in principle, do you think it's a good idea? No other council has tried 4 weeks before. I know there are other councils that do 3 weekly collections. Are they popular? Do they work?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to start with, Sarah-Jane, is, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So I welcome Tara's comments to say the system needs to change. Now, the degree to which it needs to change is the big question mark. I think it has proven that parts of the UK, parts of Wales have 3 weekly, 4 weekly collections, and there is some indifference. You will always get differences of opinion, but generally it has absolutely led to higher recycling rates in Wales. And that was one of the big motivating factors for them to do a much better job of recycling than we do in England, because they were prepared to restrict the amount of waste up to 40% at the moment. In that black bag waste that we get, the black bin collection that we get is recyclable. So unfortunately, it does need a range of measures. I think expanding the nappy collection would definitely go some way, I suppose, to stave off the criticisms that, there's going to be smelly bins in summer and all of those things.
Is it going to stop people from being lazy? Because, I'm quite a keen recycler. I'm one of those people that rinses the yoghurt pots. But, I know I go to other friends' houses and they're like, oh, just chuck it all in the same thing. And when they come to my house, they put something in the wrong bin. Oh, I don't like it. But not everyone's like that. But if they can have smelly bins hanging around for a month, is it going to force people to rinse their yoghurt pots?
Well, the main thing about those smelly bins is the food waste, and that's the largest fraction of waste left that is recyclable in the black bins that we currently get collected fortnightly. As a Bristol resident, I know that as soon as I implemented food waste recycling and used a food waste caddy, it meant that I didn't need to have my black bin collected every fortnight. I put it out only once a month as it is. So I suppose I'm living proof. There's only 3 people in my household, though, my partner and my daughter. So I do appreciate that there's going to need to be different capacity requirements for different households.
OK, well, look, that consultation period is open. It started this week. Robbie Staniforth from the podcast Talking Rubbish, and Tara Mirren, leader of the Better Streets campaigning group and member of the Bristol community. Thank you so much for your input tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come on the programme, the wheels of justice in motion, quite literally. We'll bring you what could potentially be the slowest police chase ever. And coming up in sport, England keep their hopes alive of winning the T20 series against India. We'll have the updates.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Katie Spencer, and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
I'm Lisa Dowd, and I'm one of Sky's Midlands correspondents. The reason I do this job is because you never know where it's going to lead.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
It's really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot, by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See.
This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
A lot of action going on. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Sunday, exclusively on Peacock, with the top of the Premier League still unsettled.
This duo have been in a league of their own.
Two clubs desperately scramble to climb the table.
The blockbuster fixture.
Arsenal.
Just what Arsenal needed.
Manchester City.
Chance for Haaland. Goal for Haaland.
This is the Premier League. Sunday, 11:30 Eastern, only on Peacock.
Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. Coming up, hopes that Britain's loneliest bat could finally have found a mate. But first, Teddy is here with the sport. And we're talking about the referee, Michael Oliver. And this is after a decision he made at the weekend on Saturday. And he's been receiving a lot of abuse on social media.
He has received social media abuse, death threats to Michael Oliver. Here's the scene you can see pictured behind us. Sends off Miles Lewis-Skelly in Arsenal's big game at Wolves. Arsenal trying to push to stay in the Premier League title race. Wolves trying to fight for their lives at the bottom of the table. Miles Lewis-Skelly pulls down Matt Doherty. He's trying to launch a counter-attack. Referee Michael Oliver sends him off there. PGML, Darren England, so the video referee at the time, VAR official, chooses not to overturn the decision, or at least say to referee Michael Oliver to go and look at the screen. There's the teenager from Arsenal making the trip. There's been different conjecture over whether that was a sending off or not. Alan Shearer, obviously former England striker, says that it was the worst decision he'd seen. Mikel Arteta was fuming there. You see the Arsenal head coach afterwards. Arsenal have launched a bit of wrongful dismissal, and that has come back with a decision today. But as you say, I suppose the key thing has been the response to that. PGML, the referee's governing body, saying it's unacceptable. UK policing unit are looking into those threats. Death threats, along with threats to reveal his home address off the back of that.
Yeah, Arsenal have come out as well and say they support him.
Yes.
They appealed the decision. I was going to ask what the outcome was, but I've just seen it on the screen. It was overturned, Teddy.
It was overturned. So I would say it was an interesting contention one. A lot of people in uproar saying it was definitely not a sending off for the 18-year-old, but it was cynical. And some people like Dean Ashton, former England striker on Sky Sports tonight, saying he could see a case for the sending off. But the wrongful dismissal claim by Arsenal has been upheld, which means crucially for them is the Premier League title race. Miles Lewis-Skelly, this young fullback, only 9 Premier League appearances, but will be available. Been really impressing against Manchester City this weekend, who are sort of faltering in the title race, but that'll be a big game for Arsenal. So he's available for the next 3 games, includes a League Cup semi-final, second leg as well. So that's the situation for Arsenal. Miles Lewis Skelly available. Have news of the other day's sports news in just a second.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
The end of a playing career doesn't always mean the end of a journey in football. Tom Reynolds took a completely different route.
I joined Charlton Athletic at the age of 9 and then stayed there for 3 seasons and left around 12. And then the next year I joined West Ham, played just for 1 season and then got released. It wasn't a tough release, it was just basically you're not good enough, and that was fine. I'd played football for 10 years. I wanted to use that knowledge and go into something, and everyone that weren't making it as footballers were going into coaching and going into managers or physiotherapists, and for me it was a case that I was like, there must be something else.
From Reading and Charlton to working in analytics, then on to Russia with Lokomotiv Moscow and Germany with Eintracht Frankfurt. Tom has spent over a decade behind the scenes in football.
At the time, I'd never heard of performance analysis. It was only until I went to university that I knew that was an avenue. Performance analysis can lead to 5, 6, 7 different roles now.
Do you ever now miss playing?
Yeah, I think I still find it where I'm talking to a player or I'm talking to a coach where players are around and you see them going out on the football pitch and you're the one dragging the equipment or setting up the equipment.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, some potential good news for the UK's loneliest bat. For more than 20 years, this male greater mouse-eared bat hibernated alone in a disused railway tunnel in Sussex. He was the only one of his kind in the country. This was after he was discovered back in 2002, a decade after the species was officially declared extinct. It's the largest British bat species, the size of a small rabbit, with a wingspan stretching in flight of nearly half a metre. Well, now, a second greater mouse-eared bat has been found, and this one is female. She has been found at Dover Castle, and we can speak to Daniel Whitby, founder of the Bat Conservation and Research Unit, who can tell us all about her. What an exciting discovery this is.
Yeah, it is quite exciting. Just to clarify a little bit there, this female is actually being found in the same area the male has been found, but in the same week there's been another individual that hasn't been sexed, which is the one in Dover Castle.
They may already know each other.
They may already know each other. Like you said, the male's been around for about 2 decades, but we haven't seen him for the last 2 winters. And then we've had the female that was turned up this winter. So there is hope that they may meet. He could still be around. Hopefully they could breed. And then if we could find a breeding population in the UK, that'd be amazing. It'd be effectively bringing this species out of extinction as a UK resident breeding species.
Oh, sounds a bit perfunctory. Sounds like you're leaving it to chance. Is there any way you can foster some kind of meeting between the two? I mean, I know you've got to let nature take its course, but, you know, you thought these bats were extinct here in Britain, and now the 2 of them in the same space. How can you help them along, as it were?
Well, the main thing we can do really is try and protect their habitat, try and protect the features that they're using. So we've found them using these tunnels. That's the only area we have that we know is really important for them. So protecting them is first and foremost really important. Protect and enhance any of the habitats. These are insectivorous bats. They specialise in eating larger beetles. So anything we can do to improve the habitats within the wider area could make it better for this species. And we're now going to implement some further research, more surveys, see if we can try and find out where they're using in the summer, if they're resident, where they're resident, and then see about getting that protected and helping, hopefully, a breeding population.
Yeah, what was the thinking behind why they disappeared in the first place?
It's a bit unknown. So the first crash was all the way back in the 70s, long before my time. There were a number of reasons that caused this population to crash, including pesticide treatments that were happening in a lot of buildings for wood-boring beetles. That caused a number of populations of species to crash, including species like greater horseshoe, which are now also making a recovery. And we've got populations using these tunnels in the same area by greater horseshoe bats that weren't present a couple of decades ago.
Well, Daniel, listen, really exciting news in the world of bats. Really glad we could get it on the programme. Keep us updated as to how
Will do.
they get on, because I know you're tracking their progress and we'll be tracking them too. That's Daniel Whitby there. Daniel, thank you very much. Now, just before we go, Daniel, you might want to stick around for this because this is quite unusual. We're going to bring you what could be the slowest police chase ever. I better get a move on because we've got quite a bit to fit in. This is police responding to reports of shoplifting at the Meadowhall Centre on Sunday. And they tried to pull over the suspect, who was a woman in a motorised wheelchair. Easier said than done, though, the woman giving them the slip twice before the chase was brought to an end. The woman admitted to stealing the goods and was dealt with by way of an out-of-court disposal. That is all from the UK tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night at 8. Up next, it's The World with Barbara Sarah. See you tomorrow.